Welcome to the driveway. My wife's out shopping, so we're commandeering the kitchen. I did this once before with crawfish and I didn't get in trouble, so we might get away with it. Today I'm going to talk about acorns. I gathered acorns a while back. I always gather them for my goats because it helps with worms. A lot of people say don't give acorns to goats. Well, anything in excess is a bad idea. So I do give my goats acorns, and I don't know if you're a person that hunts, but deer very rarely have any kind of worm load, and a lot of that's because of the tannins in the things they eat. The acorns that fall, that's a huge dietary staple for deer, and the fact that they eat all those, it cleanses their bodies. This is my theory, but I think I'm right. And so you could check that out with your local extension agent, but I've never heard it from anybody else, but I really believe the tannins in the acorns and the leaves help deer not have worms. Goats can't range usually as much, so you have to bring the acorns to them, but I see a huge improvement in my goats. Other people say that acorns can hurt a goat, cause some problems. I guess I don't give them enough. I don't give them so much that it makes them sick, but a few additions a few times a month during the fall doesn't seem to hurt my goats and does help with worms. But the tannins are what you want to leach out if you're a human being. We can't eat tannins. So what I've done is I've gotten one of these pieces of ancient technology, the mortar and pestle, which is a great thing. Anybody should have one, and this is the perfect size. I've taken acorns previous to today. You split the outer hull off of them. You know, they have the little cap, you take that off, and then there's a brown hull. You break that open, and inside is the meat. What you want to do is I let it dry first. Some people just crush it right then. I let it dry, and then I put the pieces in here and break them up, and then with a swirling action powder them up to about this consistency. This is about 3 ounces. I put them in baggies, I throw them in the freezer. So today we're going to experiment with cooking them. Had some bacon this morning, got a little bacon grease left in the pan. But what we have to do first is add a little water. We add a little water, and then this becomes a mush. We've added a little water. We want to make a mush out of this. And you'll just have to go along with it to see how much water it needs. And we want it to get soft again. We dried it out so we could grind it up into a flour type consistency. Actually looks a lot more like oatmeal. But we want to get all that wet. Alright, so we've soaked our acorn mush into a gruel, and you can actually eat it this way. My wife's back, so I'm probably in trouble for messing up the kitchen, but you can eat it as this gruel. It has absolutely no flavor. And that's good, because it means we've leached all the tannins out when we left it overnight in the creek, wrapped in that towel, that hanky. Now, when it's this consistency, like oatmeal, we've got our pan of bacon grease from this morning frying. We are going to take a spoon and make little piles of this. Kind of like we're doing an oatmeal cookie, spreading it out on a pan, but we're frying it. Hopefully this holds together. Acorn gruel does have a bit of a binding agent in it. Not as good as eggs, but now if you cook it, if you boil the tannins out, that binding agent I've heard goes away. Something interesting about this, I think in one of my other videos about rose hips, I mentioned that British school children during World War II went around and gathered up rose hips, like tons of rose hips, to keep the island nation from suffering from scurvy. Well, the Japanese had a similar problem during the war. Their rice and flour rations started to fail. And again, they're an island nation just like Britain. And the Japanese school children, not just tons, but hundreds of thousands of tons of acorns they went around and gathered. And they processed it into a flour, and it really saved them. It kept them from starving to death. So you got 2 island nations during the last Great War going around and gathering these food products. We think this kind of stuff isn't relevant anymore, but it's very relevant. It saves societies to just know this kind of stuff. Also, just so you know, this is 3 ounces, about 3 ounces. You're looking at about 400 calories and probably between 20 and 25 grams of fat. So another video we talked about how hard it was to get fat out in nature. Well, there's quite a bit of fat, and then not an inconsiderable amount of calories we're dealing with. So just to go around and gather a nut off the ground and then let it soak overnight in a creek in some running water, that's not too bad. If you're out in a lost in the woods situation, you're probably going to be eating this raw, but you cannot leave it unsoaked. You have to soak it, either in multiple changes of water or in a running creek, because if you try to eat it with all those tannins in it, it could cause your kidneys to fail. It's that big a deal. So just remember that. I'm going to spare you the pain of watching this fry for 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to cut this off, and when they're done, I'm going to hopefully have something to show you. Okay, these Acorn patties are about done. Let me show you what they look like. Still in the bacon grease. Oven's off. They're just... They did not hold together as well as I hoped, but that's alright. You can see they look like little overdone hamburger patties. Let the grease drain a little bit. That one in particular is not. Seemed like the wetter ones, the ones that were the soggiest when I spooned them out, held together the best. So, FYI. And I'll have that to clean up. Wasn't quite as bad a mess as I thought I'd made. Not too bad at all, actually. Make sure your oven's off. Now, again, when this is just mush, it doesn't have a flavor. I told somebody once that it was like grits before you put butter or anything in there. So this should have that bacony flavor. It's got a hint of bacon, yeah. It took on that flavor. So I think you're looking at a natural food that you could probably cook with. You could add a little flour with this and a little egg. It would probably hold together better. But it's edible. It's not disagreeable. It's bland. But you could definitely do this in a pinch, or I mean, you might like it. If I was out in the woods, I probably would eat it just as the wet mush stuff, because that's so much easier. But if you had a hot rock, you could probably cook it like this. If you had any animal fat from a trap or something you had taken, you could do this. You could also put it in a stew with the meat of whatever, and it would probably be a bit of a thickener. I can't think of many animals you'd catch that would have enough fat to really help you, except maybe a possum or a hog. But if you're catching a hog, you're in high cotton. So this is what it is. It's little fried fritters of Acorn. Now you know.